I was persecuted as a witch.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't actually kill me. They took the use of my legs by cutting the tendons on the top of my legs, and then took my baby.
Wow.
Now, you're a mother. You can probably understand the rage that you would feel in that moment. You know, it's like a white hot searing rage, and then you're physically unable to go after them. And in that moment, I recall it so clearly. I went into that white hot rage and I wanted to go after them and curse them. And then I decided, like, hang on, no, I'm not going to give back their own energy that they're giving. I'm going to use this rage to create something better in the world. Where do I need to direct this to create more? Now, in the last 18 months, I've had similar experiences that had come from dealing with some stuff after leaving my marriage, and that I decided to go into the bush because I just needed to clear my head. And that rage, I felt that feeling of rage come over me again. And this is where the work with women come in, because it's dealing with patterns of abuse, emotional abuse, boundary setting. But I felt that rage come in, and again, at this point, I've been calling in Lilith and Hecate, right? Or I didn't call them, they just kind of followed me. But and I remember Lilith coming in, and she was explaining to me that in that rage, that darkness, we see anger as a dark emotion or something to fear, but in that darkness, or what we perceive as a darkness, we create from a void. And what is it that you want to create in the world? Because you're feeling really angry, but it actually gives you focus, because you just go, I see an injustice here and I don't stand for it. What do I stand for? So how am I going to channel what I'm experiencing in my darkness, where I'm totally crumbled and I have no idea where I'm going forward? Because whether it's grief or anger or fear, what is it you actually want to create from this space? And that's where you use your darkness to bring it into the light, to create something into the light. And that's where you make the difference.
I love so much that you're talking about this. Okay, so welcome everyone to yet another episode of Through the Magical Door. I am Samaya, psychic alignment coach, and I am here with my lovely guest for the day, which is Vida Hill. She's an international psychic medium, has been a practicing energy healer for over 20 years. And Vida is passionate in offering energy activations to support you in accessing your highest potential, realizing your purpose, especially when it comes to women's empowerment towards living a life filled with loving, fulfilling relationships. So that's a big focus for Vida. She's also a homeschooling mom to 2 boys, and she enjoys participating in African and hoop drumming circles, as well as practicing her hand at archery. Vida, thank you so much for being here today. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you for having me.
I loved seeing how similar we are in our backgrounds, working wise, and with our healing work. You know, you're being a psychic medium and a healer as well, and the whole aspect of women's empowerment as well. That used to be my background. I'm always curious to know, Vida, kind of people's personal journeys and what led them to doing what they do now. So what do you think you would like to share about your background, your personal life, maybe some of your turning points that kind of led you to doing what you're doing now? What do you think would be useful for us to know?
Well, for me, I wanted to be a psychic since I was 4.
Wow.
And then I remember thinking, no, that's only for special people. And I decided to be a vet instead. Turns out I'm not great at chemistry and physics. So I wasn't going to pass vet school past the first year. So I ended up with psychology and going down a more counselling type of route with my studies. And when I was about early 20s, 21, 22, I had an event where it was quite an unusual event where I had a house burned down, and the way this whole experience transpired was, let's just say there was some divine intervention in that house burning down.
Was it your house? Your house?
Well, a house that we rented, yes.
Wow.
And I had done, that afternoon, I had done a clearing ritual, a feng shui clearing ritual. And I was very specific on what I wanted to do. And I decided that I wanted to clear everything in the house, from working my way from the bottom of the house to the two-story house to the top, and clear all the clutter out. And I also wanted my boyfriend to sort his stuff out. Yeah. So I went out that night, and I got a phone call a couple of hours later from my mum saying, I was living with my mum. She said, you need to come home. What did you do? I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't sound good. Whatever it was, I did. Anyway, I came home and I didn't have a house anymore. And the fire had started in my bedroom, and it worked its way up exactly as I'd written down on my script, all the way up through the house. Cleared most of the stuff out. Most of it had to be trashed. A few things survived. And the next day, my boyfriend drove 2 hours and broke up with me. I cleared everything out.
Oh my goodness.
I ended up staying at friends. It was actually my now ex-boyfriend's friends, because they would take me and my cats in. And me and one of my friends that I stayed with there, we decided to do a psychic development course. So the two of us and my mum went along and did a 6-week psychic development course. And we got to end of the 6 weeks, and the lady had invited one of her friends over, and when this woman walked in, I recognized her from the psychic fairs, because I used to go to the psychic fairs. She came in with a big dog in spirit, and I thought, oh, that's weird. She's got a big dog with her, but nobody said anything. And I thought, oh, okay, whatever. And then at the end of the night, she said, who saw what came in with me tonight? And I was like, yeah, me. And I was the only person who'd seen this dog come in. And she said, yeah, that's right. Her son Bernard had passed away a week earlier, and she called him specifically to see who would pick up on him.
Wow.
So that then progressed to me doing an angel workshop with a lady who turned around and said to me, I'm running a psychic fair next weekend and you will be there. Which was, I started doing public readings when I was 23. I was just like, okay. So I got thrown in the deep end. And there I met a lady who became, I call her my spirit mum. I ended up half living with her for 6 months.
Wow.
And she trained me up. I'd already done Reiki courses and spiritual healing courses, but she really took me into a deep dive in a very different direction, to coming from a space that is very fearless and working very much with discernment. Like anything that might be perceived as darkness, you actually sit with it and feel it out, rather than just labeling it as dark and scary. Actually, how to work with it and how to have a discernment of the energy it brings. So that pushed me into a space where I learned to have very little fear of what comes in, and anything that came in that was unusual, I would go to her and say, what is this? And she'd explain it. So I guess I was kind of pushed into the deep end, and it hit me one day that while I hadn't always done this full time, because I was also working on a corporate job, I had actually gone back to my childhood dream from when I was 4 years old. And I'd always known what I was going to do. So for me, I can look back and recognize that my life was always on this path.
Yeah.
And my mum always said that even as a child, I would, if something was wrong with somebody, I would go and sit and put my hands on them. So it was just my life, and it has always been my life.
It's a great story. It's a great story. And now thinking about what you said, you knew from 4 years of age you wanted to be a psychic. Actually, you were a psychic. You knew that who you were, basically, and that you were going to grow into it. So it was just amazing from such a young age to know what you were meant to be and how you were meant to show up in the world, how you were meant to help. That's a pretty incredible story, you know. And also, you talking about being thrown in the deep end, it kind of feels a little bit like maybe, was it the deep end, or was it kind of organically where you were meant to be? You know what I mean? It was like, maybe I hear you now, maybe felt like that at the time, but actually you were right at the right place at the right time from the sounds of it.
It's something I always tell people who sort of look at that experience when you recount it and go, wow, that would have been very traumatic. And actually, well, for me, it wasn't. For me, it was the best thing, one of the best things that had ever happened to me. And
what you mean, the destruction of the home, the
yes, because that put me on such a different trajectory. And the backstory to that was the second time in 6 months I'd walked out of a situation wearing only the clothes I had on my back.
How liberating, eh?
So and the time before that, I ended up in Egypt with no clothes. And that was a story all on its own. To go through Egypt for 2 weeks with just very little clothes as a woman, it's interesting. But it was such a hugely spiritual experience that I brought back. And then that experience happened. And while it seemed like you're thrown in the deep end, it was actually the start of something. And I even knew when it happened, because I remember when I called my friend and she's like, I think you're in the doghouse. I see a picture of you in the doghouse. I'm like, yeah, I'm being investigated for arson.
Were you being investigated for arson, eh?
They considered looking at me for arson. Yes, I was one of the prime suspects for a while there.
Wow.
And because it started in my bedroom, right?
Right.
And yes, so, and we laughed about it. I remember how we just thought it was the funniest thing, apart from a slight trauma that came with it, how it was actually the funniest experience, because life suddenly just, but everything that led up to that moment, like me knowing that I needed to open a door somewhere else for the cats to get out of the house, because I remember getting in my car and I looked back and went, if something happens to the house, my cats can't get out. So I went back inside and I opened a different door for them, which is where they escaped from. So everything that led up to it.
Yeah, it was meant.
It was meant to be, and you can't make those kind of things up.
No.
And taps you into intuition so much that you just go, well, I cannot deny what I've got here.
And the thing that actually this was meant to happen, whatever was represented from the home and everything that he held was actually, you needed to start from the true foundation. You needed to kind of, in a way, release to start new. And that does happen a lot, though, with energy work and intention, right? It happened with one of my clients the day or a few days straight after we did a protection activation for her home, her belongings, everything. She had all the belongings in her van, which was a lot of money, completely stolen, but she was insured. She got the money back. But it worked out that she needed to release a lot of that to start fresh. But isn't it? It's quite a powerful thing that can happen through energy work. But I also love what this opens up for conversation, Vida, because there's something in this, isn't there, that can happen with the healing process and kind of activation work and the power of intention when we are ready, and when we're sort of ready to step into sort of our destiny in our lives, where that aspect of loss, it can be an integral part, right, as a way of starting fresh. And I just wonder, I'd love to hear your insights on this, maybe from experiences you've had with clients as well. And why does that feel important? And bearing in mind, we have an eclipse coming up, right? And this whole thing about clean slate, why is this important when it comes to kind of like stepping into destiny, or starting afresh, or, you know, kind of like, I guess, choosing to move deeper in our life's path? Why is that aspect of catharsis, release, is important? And why does it happen to some people and not others, right? Some people will be clinging on to their life, and then there's people who like everything just blows up in their faces. I'm curious about that because I think it's a very interesting topic.
So the way I look at it, and it's something I've had to sit with again in the last 18 months, right? Because again, had an experience where my whole life just collapsed on itself, and I collapsed on myself, and I didn't know that you can go that deep and dark. And how do you even begin to pick yourself up again? Like, you know you're going to get through it, but you have absolutely no idea how. But what my guides were showing me in that process was, it's kind of, if you can imagine, if you were to shatter a glass, like I'm actually seeing like a jeweled glass, like a mosaic type glass, and if you were to shatter it, and then you drop away all the bits that were a little bit crummy, maybe a bit cracked, and then you start rebuilding it into something entirely different. And you only keep those parts of you that's really shiny and bright and light.
Yeah.
And everything else is kind of like it disappears and it falls into the ashes. And I guess it's like the phoenix rising out of ashes, right? But you basically get to rebuild yourself, or it's not even that rebuilding yourself, as you actually whittle yourself down to your true essence, and you let go of all those parts that aren't actually truly you. And you drop your baggage. You start dropping away your baggage and those layers, everything that you were told you are by others that you're not. And you come down to recognizing more of yourself. Yeah. Now, why does it happen to some people and not others? I don't really know. Maybe some people are just destined to, the way my guys explained it is probably not very PC or politically correct.
Yeah.
Was some people are here to be really shiny and bright. And then there's just your run-of-the-mill people. They kind of just a space fillers, and they just sit on the edges, and they don't, at least from where you're sitting, it looks like they're not doing much or achieving much. They kind of just doing life, they don't seem to have ambition. They don't seem to be motivated to be better or do more or have more or go and achieve anything for themselves, really. And I'm sure they are doing the work in their own way. But then there are those of us who come and we're really focused because we have a lesson or an experience to be had that we signed up for, which is really honing down into breaking all those layers away.
Yeah.
But
I definitely
we can't compare ourselves to space fillers,
yeah,
for lack of a better word.
And I love what you said. I really love that you brought that imagery in, actually, from your guides and your experience. I really like that. And it's something like I call almost like a energetic composting. What comes with that, the things that come with us get recycled because they have important sort of nutrients and ingredients that are still nourishing for whatever the new phases that we're moving into. I get a lot of organic references with earth and kind of, and I really, really like that. And maybe it's this thing that actually there is no judgment in this. It's about what we're meant to align with. And if that spark is that strong, and if that focus and that desire and that destiny shines really strong for some people, it's gonna turn things around. Like, I remember saying to Spirit, I want no stones unturned. Like, I want everything, all the cards laid out in the table. And it really did bring my life upside down. And it certainly destroyed aspects that, and it was in that destruction that I actually really saw what I was made of. Like, I really tested my mettle. And actually, where I needed to bring my alchemy, it came into fruition. It was through that process of regeneration and things falling apart that actually I realized, I didn't realize I had these resources. It's almost like I had to lose these things, and I had to have these brand new phases in life where I had to dig into those resources and understand what I was capable of, which sounds to me kind of similar to the path that led you. And I'm curious to know, because you talk about the darkness aspect, because I think that's a thing that is an important aspect. And you talk about, you find yourself going within and accessing aspects of yourself that you didn't think you would, or something along those lines. I wonder how did you navigate through that space? And what kind of resources did you access in yourself, or what was that journey of that dark night of the soul? How was that important for you in this where you're at now? And what kind of resources in yourself did you find? And in spirit, did you feel that you've access to be able to navigate yourself through that space? Because I know there's people who might be watching who kind of in a similar space, and it's an inevitable part of our human experience on the planet. So curious to know about what that was like for you and what became helpful for you during that time, if it's something that you can tangibly put into words at this stage.
Yes, I think I can. I think start with, once you go through the process, there's no going back to who you were before, right? There's no going back. Yeah. Even if you want to, even if your heart's crying and you're sitting in grief and pain and you really want to go back to what was before, you just know you can't, because the pain of going back was far worse than dealing with a process. And the process isn't always comfortable. And I worked with a coach who once said alignment isn't always, it's not always unicorns and roses. Sometimes alignment feels crappy.
Yeah. It feels like your house burning down on a fire and losing everything you have. Yeah, absolutely.
And you're standing there going, what now? I have to rebuild from scratch. But you're not really rebuilding from scratch. And I think what happened for me with going into the darkness, and I'll tell a story around it, because I actually had a past life memory that surfaced from the last 2 years. And I was a herbalist in that past life, but I was persecuted as a witch. Mm-hmm. And they didn't actually kill me. They took the use of my legs by cutting the tendons on the top of my legs, and then took my baby.
Wow.
Now, you're a mother. You can probably understand the rage that you would feel in that moment. You know, it's like a white hot searing rage. And then you're physically unable to go after them. And in that moment, I recall it so clearly. I went into that white hot rage and I wanted to go after them and curse them. And then I decided, like, hang on, no, I'm not going to give back their own energy that they're giving. I'm going to use this rage to create something better in the world. Where do I need to direct this to create more? Now, in the last 18 months, I've had similar experiences that had come from dealing with some stuff after leaving my marriage, and that I decided to go into the bush because I just needed to clear my head. And that rage, I felt that feeling of rage come over me again. And this is where the work with women come in, because it's dealing with patterns of abuse, emotional abuse, boundary setting. But I felt that rage come in. And again, at this point, I've been calling them Lilith and Hecate, right? Or I didn't call them, they just kind of followed me. But, and I remember Lilith coming in, and she was explaining to me that in that rage, that darkness, we see anger as a dark emotion or something to fear, but in that darkness, or what we perceive as a darkness, we create from a void. And what is it that you want to create in the world? Because you're feeling really angry, but it actually gives you focus, because you just go, I see an injustice here and I don't stand for it. What do I stand for? So how am I going to channel what I'm experiencing in my darkness, where I'm totally crumbled and I have no idea where I'm going forward? Because whether it's grief or anger or fear, what is it you actually want to create from this space? And that's where you use your darkness to bring it into the light, to create something into the light. And that's where you make the difference.
I love so much that you're talking about this. And actually the catalytic and motivational energy that anger brings, you know, it's a really important messenger. I keep on having conversations with my son about this. You know, we don't demonize anger. We really utilize it as a way of, it has something important to say, that, you know, we don't want to keep it in the body. We don't want to sort of keep it locked down. And then it can unlock an incredible sort of like range of things to get into conversation about and to really process. And it can be extremely motivational and a powerful catalyzer for change and growth. So I love that you're talking about that. And that's a really powerful story. So having gone through this process and having used this kind of energy, then would you say then that the experience of using the understanding of using that anger to create and channel through something, is that how your current life, you experience your current life, and the what's coming out of this lifetime and what you're doing with your work now, would you say is the result of that process? What do you feel is that for you at the moment?
I would say yes, because if even looking back historically, right, everything that I've thought, hang on, this isn't right. There's something that doesn't sit right with me. Have come from a space of, I see, I guess, an injustice here, or a system that's not working. There's a system that's not working, whether it's a personal system or a global system, and that needs to be changed so that people have more freedom. So, for instance, in context of my own life now, and where I now see a lot of women coming in, is supporting them with really actually being okay with themselves and making time for themselves and giving back to themselves and not feeling guilty or bad about it. But I'm seeing a lot of women stuck in, situations where they are not being valued. Often there's an underlying level of abuse there that comes to light when you start talking and you start digging deeper.
I would say it's in every single person I've worked with. That pattern of having experience in some way or other is definitely very prominent with most women. Yeah.
And I think we are so conditioned that as women, especially as mothers, you have to give your all. We're living in a society that's so imbalanced. There's no village, right? And you have to give your all. You have to sacrifice all of who you are. And most women I talk to in that space, they're tired, they're exhausted, but there's also a lot of resentment there because they do not get to actually breathe and be free as who they are. And in my experience, as you start shifting the dynamic, you become a better partner, and you become a better mother, and you just become a better person towards yourself, because you actually learn to have compassion and care for yourself as you learn to. I was asked, how did I become so selfish? Well, it's actually served me really well, because there's a whole lot of freedom on the end of selfish, right?
And you're talking about that as a woman who is also a homeschooling mom. You're homeschooling your kids and working as a psychic medium. So it's not necessarily that you've got your kids out being taken care of by other people. You stepped into that role yourself fully.
Yeah, I became a single mom. So I've got 50-50 share with my kids. I'm alone with my kids, 1 week on, 1 week off type scenario, homeschooling them. And I'm a better mum for having made the decisions to honor myself, to move out of spaces that didn't honor or value me, so that I could set a better example for my kids. But I had to become that better person, that more wholesome person, to be able to give them a foundation to be more wholesome themselves. And I'm finding this is where a lot of women are struggling, because they feel they have to give so much. They've got nothing left to give.
Absolutely.
They have nothing left to give.
Absolutely. I love that you shared that. And having grown up in a Mediterranean setup where my mom was constant self-sacrificing, and it was extremely confusing and difficult for me as a younger woman, having had that model of kind of, I guess, giving, but to an extent, to the effect of completely self-sacrificing to the detriment of her health. It was extremely difficult to kind of like grow out of in my 20s. I knew that, it was being very detrimental for me. And it was such an empowering moment and process to become something different in my life for myself and for my son, and to live from a completely different paradigm. And it is a very powerful thing to be holding sacred space for women to heal through. But I do want to come back to what you were talking about, because I feel there's something else that feels really potent in what you shared with that process of, because that's such a strong experience to have had, having had that past life experience where so much harm has been done to you and experiencing that level of abuse, and then not having, and then sort of not even being in a position to use your legs to go after your children. It's such a strong thing, that image and that experience. And when you talked about that energy of going into that darkness of it, and that choice that came with it, that feels really important to go here. You know what I mean? Because you could have made a ton of other choices, but you didn't. You chose, and I don't want to say, it's not even that you chose to be a bigger person. It was more like you knew for your benefit, you had to alchemize that energy in a way that was going to be the most powerful for everyone involved. Right? On a karmic level, on an emotional level, on an empowerment level, that served so many different purposes. That choice was a really powerful choice, but it also for me brings that perspective also around, you know, when I think about forgiveness, this was so much more powerful than forgiving, almost. You know what I mean? Because there's a sense of like, it wasn't that you just felt like, oh, I need to go and forgive. You actually chose to do something very powerful, use that sacred rage to create something strong and to catalyze and alchemize the energy to choose a much more powerful option to live from then onwards. How do we do this? How do we make, for those who are going through a really hard time right now or experiencing something that's really enraging, how do we get to choose this, and how do we kind of create that safety, especially when people are not feeling empowered and are not feeling, you know, they're sort of really depleted by what has taken place in their lives? What conditions do we create so we can make those powerful choices?
So what comes to mind for me is when I make choices like that, I ask myself, what does it actually want to see in the world? What do I want to see more of in the world? And then it becomes being a living example of it. And sometimes in the moment, you're not necessarily going to make that choice in the moment. And I think that's where it's important that if you make a different decision in that moment, you hold a lot of compassion for yourself. If you, let's say, for instance, you lose your cool entirely, you know, and you lose your temper or whatever, that in that moment you recognize your limitations as a human being and that you maybe felt scared or hurt. However, every single moment you can make a different choice. So when you come out of that stage, you can go, okay, that happened, but what is it I want to see more of in this world? And I think with experience, but there's also something that happens, I think, in that moment. But with experience, it becomes easier to make those decisions more on the spot. But I think there's something that happens. There's a moment when you go into that hot rage where it kind of becomes you. And it kind of consumes you. It's almost like it burns everything away. You don't have any control over it. It's not even you making a decision. It's not your logical mind making a decision anymore. It's a burning passion that just stems in your heart where you just go, I have had enough. I have had enough. And something has to give. And I'm going to be the one that gives and make this change because I don't want anyone else to ever experience this again. Yeah. And the only way I can change that is by being that change. So I don't even think it's a logical decision. You can come to it logically, but there's a moment where it just clicks. And something takes over you. And I think that's a part of maybe even a higher self part of you that steps in and goes, I am the power here, because love is actually more powerful than hate and anger and darkness.
It is.
Because
really
that's a false power.
It is. It's so true. But then also, what I love that you've really clarified that we need to go there. We need to be able to go to the darkness for that choice to really come from that right place, as opposed to bypassing it, because we can't just sort of bypass something as big as this, right? We have to really be able to really see it for what it is, and to feel the feels and alchemize that energy within us. And in a way, that's what makes it really powerful in many ways, really. But yes, it does definitely feel like there's a component of the higher self kicking in, and maybe to trust in all the work we have done so far, because all the seeds that have been planted, they are kind of in a way helping underneath it all, kind of like navigate stuff for us and help us make those choices, even if they don't feel kind of rational. They actually are coming from a place that's been the accumulation of all the work we've done as well. It's a really powerful story, and I really love that we talked about it. I think it's a really important part of our journeys as we heal and as we grow. You know, it's definitely no unicorns and butterflies. Tell me a bit about your work, Vida, because I know you mentioned you like to do energy activation. So how do you combine I guess, your mediumship with your energy work? Is that what you do?
I do. So before we go there, can I add something to the other?
Please do. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, for darkness, something that I learned in that process is don't fear your own darkness, because something I always tell people is the darkness in me is as dark as my light is light. And you can't fear it. And then when you face your fears, they dissipate. And that's where I think that tipping point comes, when you stop being afraid of anything you're feeling and experiencing.
Yeah.
That's, I think, it helps it tip.
I think helpful for sure. And what strengthens the light, doesn't it? Like really being able to, we really understand the depth and the breadth and the power of the light a lot more. Otherwise, it feels a lot more a lot more fluffy and a lot more mental construct. To really understand the power of the light, we need to kind of get there. We need to alchemize the darkness and move through it. And then it's almost like it's two sides of the same coin, really, isn't it, in some ways?
It's a duality. You can't have one without the other.
So that's a part of your work, because you said you're particularly interested in feminine empowerment. You do your energy activations. Tell me how that all blends together for you in your work.
So the energy, I call them energy activations, because I don't really know what else to call them. And they are essentially a combination of the mediumship work, tuning in to spirit guides, I work a lot with interdimensional beings as well at the moment. Specifically, the goddess energies come through quite strongly. So
which goddess?
The goddess energies. I actually work with, they call themselves a council of goddesses, and I've got a council of witches. So those are the core I work with, and then I work with Anubis. He's my gatekeeper.
Beautiful.
And I brought him back. Well, he brought me back from Egypt, I should say, almost many years ago. So, and I find that helps bring, he brings in the masculine energy when I'm working with the goddess energies that come in. It's quite a nice energy there. But what I do from my side is I actually combine the mediumship to bring through the guidance and messages and the intuitive guidance on where the session needs to go and what to communicate to my clients. Then I combine all my energy healing tools.
Beautiful.
And the way I see it, I can actually see your energy body and go in, and I see what they call a matrix. I can actually see the matrix and shift it around, which, so you can go into each person's sort of individual hologram and move things around. Most of my work, I do more trance type of channel, not full trance. So it's not necessarily me doing the work, I'm just the channel for the work. And then there's a component where often we have a conversation, which is more like coaching or mentoring as well, which is all spirit-led and guided at the same time. So I find there's a combination, and obviously each session is different for every person, for what they need. So I don't have a specific formula that I stick to. I work with what comes through and what I'm guided to do at the time and what the person needs most to move through. So for me, it's predominantly women coming through at the moment.
Yeah.
I do get the occasional man come through. I do get the occasional man who is very aware they will come through. Interestingly enough, they usually come through with a lot of anger issues to work on. Whereas the women usually come in with, how do I find that balance? How do I find my space in the world? How do I conquer my own fears so that, you know, how can she be a better mum or a better wife or just a better person overall without losing herself in all the roles she's trying to fill.
Yeah, and with what we were talking about, I guess, really kind of that release of expectations so she can be her true authentic self, bring the truth of her inner being into those roles and actually enjoy them. I think joy is a big thing, isn't it, for a lot of this kind of work. I realize, you know, it's just women are so eager to connect with the joy,
and it's balance, right? It's balance, and
yes, it is
having
balance.
authentic connections, I think, is really important, because you find there's a lot of superficial connections where there's lack of communication, there's lack of healthy boundaries. So there's always somebody overstepping the line.
Yeah.
So it's bringing that balance and by being able to really express yourself and even asking for help, being comfortable receiving help, or just receiving, doesn't even have to be help, just receiving, and recognizing that your needs matter as well.
Absolutely. It's interesting when you talked about the overstepping the lines, and I'm just thinking about how much I used to feel that I had to control life, you know, and at 46, as a single mom who is a working mom in my own work, you know, I do what I do. I feel like the most freedom I felt ever and the most held I've ever been. But I don't even know who's doing the holding. You know what I mean? It's like, and,
I know exactly what you mean.
You know what I mean? And I love that, because I used to feel like a lot of lack of support. And it's like, who's doing this? Like, how is this even working out right now? I don't even
because
know.
You learn to hold yourself. This is the thing, you actually learn to hold yourself. And then it comes back to you in forms of friendships, in forms of work, in forms of other connections, or whatever forms it comes back as. But it's because you've actually learned to hold yourself. And
I think you're right, but I think I underestimated that, you know, that at some point it kind of creates this automation energetically where you don't even realize you're doing it. And I think the biggest thing for me that really helped me has been creating deep safety. Because we talk about change, we talk about shifts, we talk about quantum leaping, which all sounds a lot of effort personally. And I realized, you know, what I needed, because there's nothing certain in life. We cannot create certainty. But the true thing that I wanted was create safety independent of conditions. So that really led me to go within and without, with the support of spirit, I guess, and realize what was really truly available was never dependent on conditions. And that deeper level of safety has become an integral part of my life now, and my work. And it's really what really helped create those conditions, you know, that now I don't even know who's doing the holding. Rest became an integral part of it. And really kind of just letting those balls drop that I didn't even care about. To really, and in a way, it's kind of the equivalent of what you're talking about, because that happened to me after Egypt. I came back from Egypt, 2 sacred journeys in 2010. And that's when I was given the name I remember walking around saying to my teacher, Isis, and I said, Isis, people have been calling me Vasiliki is my Greek name, which I love. It's a beautiful name, but it doesn't resonate. And so, well, because your soul name is yet to come, like it's going to come to you. We went to a few places in Egypt, and then we went for a final ritual at the Great Pyramid in Cairo. And that day that I got my name, I was given this like luxury suite in front of the pyramids. We were staying in the palace.
Oh, wow.
And I had a whole suite with a lounge and, you know, and I felt like I remember that night, like one day thinking like, okay, she told me about I was going to get given my name. I went and had a nap. I fell asleep. I woke and just before, oh no, I went in my bedroom and I really felt the calling. Something was going to come up. And I heard your name is Samaya. As soon as I heard that, went straight to bed. Like I fell asleep really deeply, woke up, go to the bathroom. So my eyes had turned like an emerald green. And then I started experiencing the vibration of Samaya. And the moment I went back to London, which is where I was living at the time, so many balls that I was not meant to be holding dropped. It's kind of the equivalent of the house burning down, but a lot less destructive in that. You know?
The funny thing, the house burning down happened 6 months after I came back from Egypt. And I went to Egypt after all my stuff got stolen in Barcelona. I went to Egypt, I kid you not. I owned 2 singlets, a pair of shorts, a pair of track pants, and a bikini. That's what I took to Egypt with me.
And I know what Egyptian men are like.
Long hair. And I had the Egyptian men. I had Egyptian men stop me because I always made sure that I had 2 men with me. I would go out for a tour. I left my partner behind, and I would take 2 other guys from my tour group with me if I wanted to go out. Because my partner was useless. He was useless.
Yeah.
So I took these 2 guys with me. And I remember one man stopping me and he said, "You must be a strong woman because you have 2 husbands." I said, "You know it."
Yeah. It's very clever. Very clever.
He couldn't fathom the fact that I had 2 husbands with me.
Yeah,
I'm
nobody
gonna
can
own
mess
this.
with you. I love
And
that.
they never ever messed with me in Egypt. Never messed with me. Because I just held my I was home. I was at home.
That's exactly how I felt. And you know what? Let's talk about it. I love that we have this connection actually, because it changed my life. The initiations I received in Egypt, I did not recognize my life. And the work that Isis, my teacher, was doing was just so precious. The fact that we could go and do it was just beyond anything I've experienced. Like we could write books about what we've done and everything that happened. And that's when my psychic gifts really went through the roof. And in a way, kind of everything initiated. But the most important thing was that I just never came back the same person after those 2 journeys. And I think that Samaya, the energy of Samaya that came through, which is my soul name, essentially, my higher self name as well, and the vibration she held meant that the balls that were not meant for me to juggle, where I was trying to compensate for other people's, like I used to have a very like cutthroat, like I used to work in disabilities, and I used to often have conversations, do casework, and be an information worker and work on behalf of clients who were really being misrepresented. So I would have very tough conversations with the council, with social services and all that, and really be, but at times I would kind of like start taking on like jobs that I shouldn't have, and I would help out. I would like put money into people who were very poor and send them envelopes like in their houses. I would do all sorts of things. And then there's something when the higher self came through, is she says like, okay, we need to stop dropping some of the balls that you've started taking on. And it's like, that's not empowerment. That's not what it is about. And things really started changing for me very fast, very, very fast in many ways. And the gift of Egypt, I think I still have been unpacking, but I do think it planted the seed for all the work I'm doing now. I really, really do. And it's this thing where my life has never been the same again. It's a really big catalyzer for change.
It is.
It really is. And I think that I really recommend to people doing pilgrimages to places they have a calling to. You know, I really wanted to buy a home in Aswan. It's such a beautiful city. It's where the Isis temple is. And I remember going like at 4 a.m. when she had hired the whole temple. So we went all dressed in white, like with this lamp, completely in silence, in a boat to get to Isis temple. We were in the temple doing this grid work, and then kind of bringing our car bodies down into the underworld. And I remember one time, the second time before our journey, I really kept on getting this vision about dragons. And I did this dragon tattoo in my back. My whole back is tattooed. And when we went on the second journey, she said, we had the invitation to get here from dragons, and we have very important work to do that they have been instructing us. And every time we were doing the work, it's almost like there's this new initiations, and the going back felt like, okay. It's almost like things started changing really fast, and felt like, okay, this is your direction. And in 2 years, it just brought me to a new life where I'm now, my son, and a whole bunch of things that showed at the time as distraction, but
yes, as it does.
Yeah, including homelessness and a bunch of other things. So I'm really happy to hear about the similarities we have on our Egyptian journeys as well. Tell me about, what do you feel passionate about at the moment, either in the work that you're doing, in how you want, what you see the evolution going through into the new earth, some of the things that you feel very passionate about bringing into this new paradigm we've been stepping into. If you feel there's something to share there, what would that be for you?
This is where I've been actually sitting over the last few days, is how we actually create our lives. You know, we go into the void and we create our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not woman specific necessarily, but how we hand our power over to external forces, whether it's planets or events, when we can actually pull our power and our energy back into us. And this is what I noticed for myself. I don't allow external events to impact me as much, like whether it's Mercury retrograde or the moon cycles. They have no power over you unless you believe so.
So glad you're talking about that.
And I was actually about to put a post up just today. I kind of chickened out because I decided I'll get the dentist out of the way first. But I was sitting with going, if I have noticed for myself that when I decide something like Mercury retrograde, for example, it's not going to impact me. It doesn't. I actually have a really good time. But when I catch myself in a thought going, oh, here we go, life's going to fall apart, this Mercury retrograde, it does. And recognizing that we hand our power over to all these events or experiences, or what other people even say we should be doing, how we should be doing it, whether it's a term such as goddess or priestess or whatever. Bring your power back to you and just be present in yourself, because that's where you're creating and living from, and that's where you step into your essence, and that's actually where you sort of almost become untouchable.
Yeah,
and everything starts falling into place.
I love this so much, especially at a time where in social media, in the online space, everybody has become so prescriptive around what they need in order, you know, because that's what they're selling, right? And it kind of feels like we need to open it up a little bit more and really come back to the true power that is actually within us, and to strengthen our vibration and our energy so much so that the external just feels like play. Right. And it's kind of like, oh, well, it's interesting. You know, I remember reading somewhere, you know, the fun thing about going on a picnic is the ants that are going to interfere with your meals and you needing to move things around. So it's kind of, would it be so much fun if the ants were not there? And I really love the playfulness of that, you know. Life will give us ants in all sorts of circumstances. Are we going to stop ourselves doing that because there's going to be the ant or the like retrograde or this and then the other, like, or just going to get in our flow and just get all like into that.
If you live in harmony with life, life will be in harmony with you. And nothing can actually impact that. You know, you can have these little interferences, but you can kind of just flick them away.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to impact. They don't have to. I think we live in a space where many people, we want something to blame for when life doesn't work or go our way. We want something or someone to blame. And then we don't want to take responsibility for anything that comes up. So if you're having a bad day, he's like, oh, it's Mercury.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's Mercury's fault. And no, you still have to address it.
Absolutely. And maybe that we always have an expectation something will go wrong, right? Like something will kind of come up to block us, and we expect that, so we manifest it rather than just flow and keep on creating and growing like that. I really love that. Before we go, Vida, is there a particular, if you were to share like a ritual or a habit, something in your life sort of that you enjoy, that you know gives value to you, that you just want to share with people? I mean, it can be anything. I love taking my baths. They feel like a vibrational kind of like expansion for me. Some people talk about just enjoying just having their coffee outside. For somebody else is a practice. Whatever it might be for you, is there a thing that you enjoy, that gives you joy, or that helps expand you, or you want to share with people?
Yeah, sure. So for me, one of my daily things is meditation, or some kind of practice like that. I find that really sets the tone for my day. But something that I've adopted over the last few months was asking myself, does this bring me peace?
Yes.
If I have to make a decision, does this bring me peace?
I love
what
that.
brings it? It's sometimes you in a position where one direction doesn't feel much better than the other, but which one brings you the most peace? If you have to sit with them and go, long term, which is going to give me the most peace? It might be that you have to make a difficult choice or call or something that, you know, feels a little bit counterintuitive, but what brings me the most peace? And follow your peace. And life just kind of, it just kind of goes, you know, you can just take with sigh of relief, because suddenly you're like, I'm actually on track because I'm following my peace. And you can't really make a wrong decision when you do that. And that becomes really empowering, because you start living your life with being at peace with yourself. And you know you're actually making decisions that's honoring you, irrespective of how others may receive it.
I love that so much. That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I cannot just say I've enjoyed this so much. I feel like your experience and your depth and your knowledge really came through, and I really enjoy this conversation. So thank you so much for being here and sharing. Yeah, I look forward to sharing it with the world. The links are going to be below for those who want to connect with Vida, work with her or in any other capacity, follow her on social media as well. So thanks everyone for watching, and hopefully we will speak again very soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.